In this course, we're going to focus on animation within After Effects, so go ahead and download the assets from Skillshare, including the Illustrator file that we'll be using for animation. I'll quickly show you the setup in Illustrator before we jump into After Effects. Something that's really important in animation, especially if you have a lot of layers and a lot of assets, is naming. I use one overarching word to describe a whole set of layers that belong together, like over here. Background, I have multiple layers that belong to the background, like background stuff, etc. I use one overarching word, BG underscore, and then describing the asset that is part of that set of layers. Okay, let's head over to After Effects and set up our scene. This is what we'll be animating today. You can download the finished After Effects file from Skillshare as well. All right, let's import our assets. We're going to be importing them into this asset folder. Something that's really important here is to import your Illustrator file as composition retained layer sizes. Even if you're doing a small project, it's very important to keep a clean folder structure. So we'll move these assets into vector. I create a duplicate of the comp that I've imported. I never animate within the original comp that I've imported. In case I accidentally delete a layer and I need the original positioning back, I can take it from the original comp. So I always have that as a backup. I create a duplicate and I move it over here into pre-comps. Once I've done that, I'll color code my comp. Let's use cyan. And I'll drag this comp over to the create new composition icon. I don't like to have a lot of layers stacked on top of each other. I prefer separate comps for each scene and then have them organized within a main comp. We'll now rename this comp to main and move it out of the pre-comps folder into comps. Once we have a bunch of pre-comps, we can open and close this folder and it will be nice and clean. We'll now check the composition settings. We'll be animating at 60 frames per second. And generally what we want is to start our animation at 0, which is usually at the beginning of a comp. This poses a difficulty if we decide later we want to add some additional animation or a pause to the beginning of our comp. In this case, we would have to take all of our keyframes and layers and shift them forward. This can be a little bit annoying, which is why I set my start time code to 59 minutes and the duration of my comp to 11 minutes. That means I have 1 minute of leeway before I arrive at 1 hour in the timeline, which appears as a theoretical 0.0, and I have 10 minutes for animation. We'll add a start marker to the beginning of our scene, and we'll crop the work area by hitting B. We'll do the same with our comp. We'll trim it and add a marker. The reason why we're adding a marker here is so we have a visual aid in case we accidentally move our comp at any point. If we didn't have this marker here, we would probably not see that we've accidentally moved this comp. We can now drag the comp back if we had already done a bunch of other steps and we can no longer hit Command or Control Z. We can just then move this marker back to its original positioning. We'll do the same inside of the comp. We'll mark all of our layers, trim them, add a start marker, and crop the work area to the start of our scene. We'll now want to color code all of the layers we have here according to the group categories that we set in Illustrator. I like my background layers to be brown, and I'll just choose random colors for the rest of the layers. I'll speed this up for you so you don't have to watch me doing this in slow motion. The reason why I have a reference layer over here is because I've only set up these running bars for one line, and we can then duplicate that and move it up. So this is just so we know where these bars need to go, but we can actually ignore that. And so it doesn't render accidentally. We'll set it to a guide layer And then we'll set the color to none so they fade into the background and we can basically ignore them once we've animated these running bars. Once we've colored in all of our layers, we are going to set the length of our animation. We'll set that to 10 seconds and we'll add an end marker here. We're now ready to animate our scene.